Like if you can combine two things, eventually you'll win. And those two things are just, I mean, maybe call it grit or just pain tolerance or endurance.
Perseverance.
If you can perseverance, if you can combine that with curiosity,
Yeah.
eventually you'll win. Like if you can just have a higher tolerance to pain and just keep going, like it's going to take longer than you think.
This episode is brought to you by the best-selling book, Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, How to Turn Your Independent Film into a Money-Making Business. Learn more at filmbizbook.com. I'd like to welcome to the show, Jon Erwin. How you doing, John?
I'm good, man. You've already had my brother on, so set the bar low. You know, you've had the suave, friendly brother on. I'm the neurotic,
Exactly.
like mad scientist brother, I think he calls me. Anyway, but thanks for having me on, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, man. Yeah. I've had Andy. I had Andy on when you guys were promoting American Underdog, which I love that film. And after I watched that
Thank you.
film, I went back and I just went through your catalog because I was so impressed with how that film was put together story wise. I was like, man, there's something here. And then and then I'd heard of your other films I hadn't seen, I Still Believe and Can You Imagine and all those kind of films. And my wife and I just sat there and binged them all, man. You guys are doing some
That's
really,
great.
yeah, you guys are
I
doing some
appreciate
really,
that.
yeah, I'm seriously, you guys are doing some really good stuff. So when your new film, Jesus Revolution came up, I was like, oh, I gotta have John on. If I had the one, I gotta have the other one on. And
You
then the
got
next
it.
time
Yeah.
I'll have both of you on and that'll be
We'll
just
have
like a,
both. We'll do it together. Right now, we're dividing and conquering. We do so much grassroots marketing, but I'm glad you enjoy the films. I mean, ultimately, it's a privilege. I mean, it's a privilege to entertain people. Like
oh,
I just think that the business of entertainment is so hard, and sometimes sucks on a certain level because it's so hyper competitive. Sometimes it's easy to lose sight of just how cool it is to get to do
yes.
what we do. And
Oh,
anytime that you can sort of see something in your mind or feel it deeply in your soul, write it on a piece of paper, and then hundreds of people come around you to make that thing real. And you're sitting there with an audience, and they're moved by it, and they're watching it as if it were real. It's like magic. It's like dreaming while awake. It is a privilege to do this, and I'm grateful for the audience to supporting the work enough to let us do this for a living. I mean, this is a job that you should like work another job like behind a desk for years and years and years, save up some money and just blow it all getting to do this. So the fact that we get paid at all for this is really, really cool.
it's a miracle that anything gets made. It's a miracle that anything gets made. And that isn't it
Hmm.
fascinating that as an artist, we are the artist that spends the least amount of time doing the art, which is the days on set are
Hmm.
so few and far between. It's mostly revving up to get the damn thing made,
Yeah.
writing it, getting it produced, trying to raise money, do all that stuff. Then you spend, if you're lucky, 30 to 60 days, if you're lucky.
Uh, I would. I
Yeah,
was
we don't
talking
have.
to. Yeah, I'm not trying to name stuff. I was talking to, but having said that, now I'm going to. I had talking to Mel Gibson about his movie Hacksaw Ridge, a very good movie,
Oh,
and
such a good movie.
it's
Love
the
that movie.
director's question. Like, I was like, "How many days did you have to shoot it?" And he was like, "Man, they didn't quite have their money together. I had to shoot that movie in 58 days shooting." I'm like, "I would shoot two movies now." And he's like, "Well, on Braveheart we had 85." I'm like, "I would shoot three movies." So yeah, I've never had more than 30 days to shoot a movie,
Do you know?
and there's magic to that though. I think Orson
Yeah,
Welles said
because you're
the absence of limitation is the death of creativity. Like there's magic to being in a corner, backed into a corner, feeling panicked, and not being able to second guess your instincts. But yeah, you're right. You prep for months, you shoot for just this small time, and it's like summer camp, and then it's over, and then you edit it for months, and then you market it for months. And so you're right. The actual making of the theme of the thing and the overall process is very, very short.
and if you want to really get crazy, if you remember John Woo on The Killer, he had 170 days.
Oh, come on. What do you do?
Well,
What do you
you
do? Do you
you
show
you
up and do
make
one shot and you're like, okay, there's a good day. Good day. See you tomorrow,
you
everybody.
basically shoot those insane action sequences until your heart's content. Like that's how he was able to make The Killer
Yeah,
and Hard Boiled. They had like 140, 180 day
that's
shoot.
insane, man.
That's
insane.
sick. That's sick. Can you imagine? I
Yeah,
don't even
maybe
know
so.
what I
I
would
have no
do.
idea. I don't even know. I don't know. I wouldn't know what to do. I would have no clue how to even show up
Today,
for a day's work with
we're gonna
that
shoot a half
kind
a
of
page today,
schedule.
guys. We're gonna shoot half a
Yeah,
page,
not even. Yeah, it's like,
quarter
yeah,
page today,
we shoot this line, gonna get it 18
all
different
day.
ways, and we're done. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
you know what's funny though is for the independent filmmakers. I think for me, when we used to do music videos, you know, our career
Mhm.
started in sports television. Lied about our age, lied about my age so we become a cameraman, and somebody got sick randomly. And then my dad bought us a camera, we started making stuff, and it's like that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule kicked in. Just, you know, I really think what we do is, to your point, much more of a business than it is an art form. It's the symphony of art, and it's also much more of a craft than it is an art form. And it combines a lot of art, but a craft is something you sort of like just get better and better at every day, you know, in
Mhm.
sort of an iterative process. It's sort of like you against you, and it's a quest to just improve and slowly but surely seek to master your craft. But you know, way back in the day, we would make all kinds of music videos. That was sort of our grind, and we would do a bunch of them, like 4 or 5 a month. And
Oh
it
yeah,
was
for
after
like what, for like
Napster.
$500, like $500, thousand
Well, that's
bucks.
the thing. Well, no, what happened is it was after Napster. And so Andy and I came into Nashville, and the whole industry was like, there are no more $300,000 music videos. What are we going to do? Well, and we were like, someone's going to pay us $15,000 to do a music video. Let's do all of them, you know? And so we just, you know, and so but it was this process. But what I realized is whenever we were on the random occasion that we had all the money and all the time in the world, and there were, you know, it just becomes decisions by committee, and there were 12 execs there and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
There was a magic lost whenever, like the way we would do it is like Andy would prep a music video, and so I would show up to his set, and I hadn't even heard the song, and then he would show up to my set, and he had, and then we would just sort of leapfrog, and there was just always a magic when we never quite had enough and time or money. And there's something to the strain of having to solve problems creatively in an environment that's full of pressure that you can't second guess your instincts. It's terrible for your health and, you know, mental sanity, but it really is good for the work. And so I'm a huge fan of even like on the movie that you mentioned, American Underdog, that went from a 46-day schedule pre-COVID to a 30-day schedule post-COVID because we had to cut a third of the budget out to keep it greenlit. And I don't think that the other movie would have been better. And a lot of the things that we came up with, like using the real footage of the game, you know, which Andy
Yeah.
and editorial really did well. We couldn't choreograph near as much stuff, so we choreographed what we could exactly as it happened in the real game. And then that way we could use the actual game footage. And so there was a lot of articles and a lot of people saying that was a great artistic choice. And I'm like, that wasn't an artistic choice. That was a production limitation, you know? And so I think you just find great ideas when you're constrained.
Right. It's like, it's Jaws is the classic example of that. I
Right.
mean, yeah, the shark doesn't work.
Right.
Okay, I guess we're gonna
So don't show it. You know,
we're not going to show the shark as much. And it kind of worked out for that. I forgot the guy's name. Who
that
made
one did well.
movie. I don't even know that guy's name. Did he do anything else after?
Now that was a 50-day shooting schedule. Jaws was. They went
Yeah.
150 days. They went,
but what's not his fault.
100 days.
Can you imagine? And can you imagine that's his first big? Like he did Sugarland Express, he did Duel. We're talking about Steven Spielberg, everybody. If you don't know, and then this is his first kind of big studio based on a best-selling book, and he's like, I'm never going to work again. I'm never going to work again. He's like, he
thought he was going to get fired every day. And to his credit, water is horrible. Anytime you introduce water in any substantive way to our industry,
nature in general,
nature
in general, but water has
water specifically
because you got rain, and if you got cold, you got but the water, you can't move. Everything just, and it doesn't do what it doesn't do what you want it to do. It doesn't.
Boy, does it look good. Boy, does it look good. I think in this movie that we just did, Jesus Revolution, there's a whole sequence in the rain, and there's also some underwater dive tank work, and for this sort of dream sequence. And I remember talking to Akis, the cinematographer, and I'm like, yeah, I think we do this sequence in, a couple hours or whatever, this conversation in the rain. He was like, 6 hours later, I was like, you were totally right, Akis. And but we do have this thing that we say, pain is temporary, film is forever. And I do believe in
Yep.
that. Like, go for difficult. Go for difficult.
No question.
And because it's just better.
So, Jon, I mean, we just kind of ran off because a lot of people don't know who you and
We
Andy are.
did.
So
We went on a
we
tangent
just went
and
because we just
lost
went
the
off on a
entire
tangent.
audience, probably.
So
You
so
know.
tell me how you and your brother got you said you got into the business by music videos.
Yeah.
But your first kind of, if I'm not mistaken, your first narrative was October Baby, or one of your first
Yeah. Huh?
was October, and that
Hmm.
was a completely indie film back then. How did you raise the money for that? How did you get that off the ground? It wasn't an easy film, subject matter
Not at
wise.
all. Yeah. Yeah. Why start there? Looking back.
Yeah, right. It
Well,
was like the
basically
toughest.
we were, we started in as sports cameramen when I was 15, and then when we started, we were a service company. Really found our footing doing music videos and commercials. And then I went to, but from the South, born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. Obviously, our faith has always been a huge part of our life and community and upbringing, and and then it's just around the time that all of this sort of new thing of faith-based films was sort of emerging. Post Passion of the Christ, and Sony was doing faith-based films, and so I went to direct second unit on a faith-based film called Courageous in Georgia, and real Cinderella story. This church was making these movies, and Sony was funding them, and they were doing like 30 million in the box office, and they were tiny films, like $1 and $2 million movies. So it was amazing, and so I went down there to work on those films. They wanted to do a police drama with car chases and action sequences, and like, churches making movies and car chases should never be combined. People will die. And so I was hired to sort of go in and with professionals and go far away from the set and do the stunt work and do the action sequences, and which I love. And the director of that movie asked the question that it doesn't really matter, I think, what your beliefs are, but this is a great question to ask. He's like, we're trying to understand you, like what's your purpose and the purpose of your work? Like, why do you do what you do? And I think a lot of us focus on what we do. Very few of us focus on why we do what we do. And I couldn't stop thinking about the question. Like, I couldn't, the whole time I was working on that film, I was like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that led to sort of a fusion of a career and a calling, and the idea of joining the fray and jumping in on values-based, faith-based entertainment, heartland type stuff. And I remember we were doing a film with Sean Astin, and he said, I see you guys as frontiersmen and pioneers. And I said, thank you, Sean. That's high praise. He's like, most frontiersmen die on the frontier. and I'm like, well, they'll name roads after us, and the trail will be paved. But what I learned was it's such a privilege to be a part of anything that's emerging. Most industries it's like the cement to the foundation has hardened. So to be able to make your mark on anything that's emerging right in front of you is first of all completely out of your control. It's a factor of timing. So whether that's like technology in the 70s, in computers, or even that group of directors like Spielberg and Scorsese and Lucas and Coppola and De Palma and all those guys inventing the modern blockbuster. Like, you just have to sort of catch lightning in a bottle. So it's cool to be a part of something, and so that led to a completely different business, to finally answer your question, which is going from a service company to an intellectual properties company and starting raising money for our own films. And October Baby was first. We had to raise $800,000 to get the production of that movie made, and then we had to raise the marketing as well. And the first $250,000, no joke, was from my grandmother, who I kept getting to remind that she invested in film. And then the second $250,000 was from a surgeon named Jim, who we had filmed like 150 of his orthopedic trauma cases. And so it's just, you have to be very pragmatic. You got to get really good at solving problems. And I think the thing that we didn't realize was that really helped us was that, you really have to think holistically about a business. And in entertainment, we don't. So we think so much about the product, but we don't think about how to market and distribute the product. And so as a filmmaker, a lot of times it's like you're climbing a mountain, and you get to the top of the mountain and you think that you've summited Everest or something, and actually the fog clears and there's a mountain ahead of you that's twice as tall, and that's marketing and distribution. And so it was good fortune at the time that we couldn't get a distributor for the film, and had to then go raise another 3.5 million, which is this category of money that is prints and advertising, called P&A, to get the movie released. And then you're throwing up in a trash can on Thursday night because you've bet your grandmother and everyone else's money that and you're thinking, it's funny, we make theatrical movies, and so it's a rare part of our business that on a Friday by about noon, if the last 2 years of your life were worth anything at all. It's like an election, and I've experienced all sides of it, and it's a thrill. But luckily the film went well, and it cracked the top 10, and everyone made money, thank God, including my grandmother. We made a film for Sony called Mom's Night Out. I think one of the biggest things that I would recommend is just, like, if you can combine two things, eventually you'll win. And those two things are just, maybe call it grit, or just pain tolerance, or endurance.
Perseverance.
If you can combine that with curiosity,
yeah,
eventually you'll win. Like, if you can just have a higher tolerance to pain and just keep going, like, it's going to take longer than you think. But if you keep going, but you're not learning anything, then you're just going to repeat your mistakes over and over again. There's a lot of people like that. But if you have a level of tenacity and perseverance, and you match that with just being a student and learning all the time and trying to understand how things work, eventually you'll catch your moment. And for me, I became obsessed with the interrelated disciplines of our industry that a lot of people resent. Like, if you're a writer and director in our industry, it's like, oh, the marketing people or the finance people. Well, what I learned is all these things are sort of inextricably linked. The high concept and script is essential to the marketing campaign, and the movie itself and its budget is essential to the overall P&L of the enterprise. And so what I think really helped me was the ability to think holistically and understand, and just by virtue of having to, being able to look sort of, and I like the name of your book, the film
entrepreneur.
That's such a cool term. To try to really have the mindset of an entrepreneur, first and foremost, and then let your creativity funnel through that. I think is a much better way to be successful in our industry.
Well, I mean, that's the reason I wrote the book, is because so many filmmakers, and I've been doing this now 8 years, and I've been doing my business. I've been in the filmmaking industry for almost 30. So I've seen and played in so many different sandboxes over the course of my career, but I keep seeing filmmakers make the same mistakes. They just like, they're stuck in the 90s. They think they're going to make a movie, go to Sundance, and someone is going to come down from Mount Hollywood, write them a check, and then they're making a Marvel movie. Like, that's their idea of success. But you and I both know that that's not the reality.
It doesn't happen.
The marketplace isn't what it was in the 90s. A movie like Slacker could find its footing. A film like Clerks could find its footing in the 90s because there was the new VHS, the video stores,
that whole home entertainment safety net. So you could lose money at the time theatrically, and then pick it up in home entertainment. And the theatrical window was enough of a billboard to justify the spend, even if you lost a lot of money, because home entertainment was so lucrative. But that was a 20, 30-year bubble,
Pretty much.
And unfortunately it's changed. The other thing, that the reason you got to stay curious, is we are in an industry that is rapidly changing. And so, that's one of I think the problems with film schools is, if you're out of the industry for 4 years, it's a different industry. And certainly COVID has actually accelerated that change. And so what COVID did, in my contrarian point of view, is that COVID's going to end up reshaping our industry, very similar to how Napster reshaped music. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull forward about a decade of change into a more constricted window. And it's going to take a lot of time now, having said that, if you can sort of skate where the puck's going to be, as Wayne Gretzky said, there's enormous opportunities opening up, but you got to sort of let go of the past and really be hyper curious about the future. And so, learning, to me, being curious and learning. And I'll give you an example of what you just said. We did our second film. Our first film did 5 million. Our second did 10. It was very profitable. Then we found our voice with a film called Woodlawn. We they say a filmmaker finds their story and tells it over and over again. And we found inspirational true stories, and that's just like our niche. Raised all the money for the film, raised about a third of the P&A, did the wrong deals, didn't basically make as much money as we hoped. We did about 15 in box office. Really needed to do 20, and that was the first time I didn't get all the money back to the investors. We had like this perfect batting average up till then with the films and the documentaries. And I couldn't sleep at night. I hate to lose. It's like my philosophy is like either we win or let's just play again. Let's just, whatever it is, ping pong, whatever, go again. And so what we did is we actually, to me, a huge part of success is just learning to fail correctly and mindfully. And failure, in my opinion, is the great teacher if you'll let it be. And so with Woodlawn, we stopped, and for 5 months, we studied it, we asked questions, and we did something that I don't know why more people don't do. We solicited a ton of criticism from people. Like, if we're going to be in an industry that has this whole category of people called critics, and we're going to read all those things obsessively, why not solicit criticism from people that actually care about you and want the best for you? So we went out to all of our friends and people in the campaign, outside the campaign. What did we do wrong? How can we do better? What can we learn from this? And it ended up with this 170-page, postmortem / Jerry Maguire manifesto, and we saw insights to the market. We saw a new business model. And that was the playbook that led to I Can Only Imagine. And I Can Only Imagine was built to break even at 15 million in box office. It did that in its first 3 days. And it did, so everything between that and the 86 million in box office that it did and becoming #1 independent film of the year was margin. But that would have never happened if we hadn't failed, #1, and we hadn't failed correctly, #2, and really learned. We didn't make a better movie. We actually spent less on the movie with Imagine. We actually implemented a better business model and a much more innovative business model. And that's what led to the success of the movie. And we also learned a lot about what people wanted. And so I would just say that you have to embrace, and what I found is the titans of our industry, Steven Spielberg, we were just talking about, he is as good a businessman as he is an artist and filmmaker. He's produced more films than he's directed. He is incredibly shrewd on the business. So is Tom Hanks, and so is Matt Damon, and so has Ben Affleck. Like we think of these people as artists, but they're also really astute business people, and you have to hold both together, and you have to value both, and you have to see the interrelatedness of both. And I think what keeps a lot of filmmakers back is they have this sort of almost elitist resentment that we're in a business and we're selling products to people,
right?
And they have to buy them,
It's so annoying. It's annoying. That's again why I wrote the book, because it was so annoying that nobody's thinking outside the box. No one's thinking that this is a product. And look, it's art. Dude, if you want to go make art in the backyard, my friend, knock yourself out. But the second you take grandma's $250,000, you better figure out a way to get grandma's money back. Am I right? I mean,
it's entertainment. It's not art. It's entertainment. It's a symphony of art to create it. But there's a nobility. I think it was John Lasseter that said the nobility of entertainment. The idea that, we provide a service. And by the way, and I just believe we're in a service business. Like, one of the things that we say is it's not about us. It's about the people sitting in the seats and the experience they're having. And that's it. And you got to get out of the way of that. And so to me, it's about entertaining an audience. It's about loving an audience. It's about getting to know an audience and serving that audience well. And the people that have really done well in sort of other niche sectors, like Jason Blum has become a good friend. And
Jason's amazing.
The way he thinks and the way he talks about the audience and entertaining the audience, and the way he places, Jay Ellis is this friend of mine, and he was one of the pilots in Top Gun. He talked about every day Tom Cruise showed up and just said, this is a privilege. What we do is a privilege. How can we exceed the expectations of the audience? So I found the really great people in our industry are much more service oriented than they are sort of selfish
Ego. Yeah, instead of
their
ego.
precious ego and their sort of artistic expression. The greats in our industry are much more about, let's entertain the audience. Like, that's the noble thing to do. Is people are paying money, they're paying in their time, they're buying popcorn that's more expensive than anywhere else on the earth. They're paying basically the same price for my movie as they are for Avatar, that costs like a cajillion
500,
times more.
$540 million.
So so the attitude that I need to have is like, I'm going to do everything I can to entertain you and to uplift you and to give you a great experience in the movie theater. And then if I've done that well, maybe I can also tell you what I believe and what I hope will enrich your life as well. But I just, the more you apply a mindset that is not common and certainly not taught in business, in film school, but a mindset of the pragmatism of business and a mindset of service in entertainment, the more you win in this industry. That's what I've found. And I think a lot of what the attitude that comes out of, that's expected from filmmakers is actually opposite of what will actually get you to the top of the industry.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm really curious to hear your position on this. The theatrical business model has changed dramatically since COVID. It was already on the downward slope. We all saw it. And like you said, a decade worth of change has been compacted in 2 or 3 years. And the theatrical business is hurting. There's no question about it. Last time I went to a theater, and I've said last year, there was only 2 movies that I went to the theater that I actually went and paid money to go see, which was Top Gun and Avatar. And those were the only 2, because those are the only 2 that I felt that deserved a theatrical experience from my point of view, for me to get out of the house and go and all that. There are other deserving movies, but for me to the kids, all that stuff, how it is. But your films are interesting because you are servicing an audience that doesn't get serviced often, and definitely not serviced well often. So it's, again, goes back to my book, which is the future of filmmaking is niche filmmaking. Finding an audience.
That's good news.
Yeah. Finding an audience and serving that audience. Like you said, you want to serve them. It's a privilege. So your audience is faith-based, and specifically not only faith-based, but the subgenre of, true stories that's kind of like where you found your magic, your secret sauce, if you will. But so it was interesting because I just moved from LA to Austin, and it's a very different.
It's a great city.
I love Austin. Austin. It's amazing. But when I go to the theater or I pass by the theater, what was one of the posters I saw? Jesus Revolution.
Oh, great. Yeah, we're doing an outdoor game.
But I saw that months ago. I saw that in the theater. I would have probably not seen that in LA. Probably not, because it's not the demographic, quote unquote, of this film. This is a heartland, center of the country kind of film. But that audience shows up. They show up to the theaters. They do that. So it's a lesson that I hope everyone listening is about, is one, an audience will show up for Top Gun because it was an amazing experience. I would go see it in IMAX today. It's such an amazing experience. But if there's something that touches their emotional nerves, that's what will get people out of seats. But with that said, what do you feel about where the puck's going to be in 3 or 4 or 5 years? Because theaters are starting to drop more and more. Screens are just going away. I've seen them just closing shop. So how is your business model going to work differently, as you probably have a longer life theatrically than most filmmakers, but at a certain point, I think it's,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting it's a great question. It's one of the questions to ask, is what's the future of the theatrical experience and theatrical window? I do study it obsessively. NRG has put out some really good reports on trends post-COVID. The short answer is, I think the theatrical window will absolutely endure, but it's just going to be different. And I think it's going to look a lot more like Broadway than what we had before COVID. And I could literally talk your off for hours about until like Steve Carell and Crazy Stupid Love You want to like roll out of a moving car, like, oh my gosh, I'm done with this. I'm a nerd for this stuff. But I'll say this: here's the question to ask for every independent filmmaker. If you're asking the question, which I think traps us, is this a good movie? Therefore, it deserves a theatrical experience. That's the wrong question.
Correct.
The best thing that I wrote down that I think is way more true now than even when I wrote it in that postmortem to Woodlawn is I wrote down, this is no longer a movie business. This is a brand-driven event business. And that's what it is. So Avatar is a brand. Top Gun's a brand, and it's an event. It's a social event, and we need those things, and we need to go see them. The thing is, we just need fewer of them, and we want them to be bigger. And there's not everything post-COVID coinciding with the streaming war. We don't need a lot of categories of films outside of our home. So if you can be one of the things that works outside the home, you actually make a lot more money right now. Like Avatar sitting on top of the box office, number one for, was it 6 weeks, 7 weeks? Like, that's not a good indicator for most of the industry. That means that we're all just going to go see Avatar, and Avatar is going to play forever, like a show on Broadway, like Les Mis or,
right.
Whatever. And Top Gun's the same way. And so what does that mean for all of us? And yeah, Blum's doing it. Megan did great. And things will work, but less works. So the real question to ask yourself with evaluating a movie for a theatrical opportunity is, I think my Gottlieb at Samuel Goldwyn, who distributed my first film, one of the great old Titan executives of the industry, said he always asked, is it a good movie? Not the right question. Is it a great movie for an audience? How many of them are there? And do I know how to talk to them? And so the real question is, can I make this as an event for an audience? If the answer to that is yes, then you have a theatrical shot. Okay, then you ask, how large is that audience? And do I know how to talk to them? And then you actually reverse engineer the economics to that end. And so what I've learned is I'm still alive in this business, number one, by the grace of God. But secondly, it's much more about mitigating risk and modeling a downside than it is betting for an upside. So like with Imagine, we built it to break even at our prior film's box office, 15 million. The film that I'm doing right now, Jesus Revolution, I feel that it's an event for our core audience. I think people are going to show up for it. I don't know. Talk to me in 3 weeks or whatever this comes out. I might be wrong, but I really do feel like it's an event, and it's like a social event, and that's why we're putting it in theaters and really going for it. But it still has a very achievable break even, and so to me, it's really about reverse engineering outcomes and protecting a downside. And so and letting, instead of saying, what does this movie cost? That's the wrong question. Say, what's the business model of this? What do we think it could achieve? And, if we don't know if it's theatrical, but it might be, well, then make it at a cost where the product is malleable and you can probably create a marketplace around it and flip it to a streamer at a profit, but still test it for theatrical. You get over a certain budget where it sort of has to go theatrical. So I think it's just about really thinking about the audience. And I think the theatrical question will become, is this an event for the audience? If you can say with a straight face, this is an event for an audience of people that I know, release it in theaters. That's going to still work. If it's not a social event, and typically a social event that's undergirded by a brand, then you're going to really struggle in today's environment releasing it in theaters.
Well, I mean, the brand, you guys put it right in the title, Jesus. That's the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Arguably, what a great marketing, by the way. Jesus is people. Great marketing over the years.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Yeah. Jesus has done well from a brand standpoint.
But the point is,
to me,
you didn't
yeah.
But let me interrupt you. You didn't hide it. And that's why I was so impressed about it, because a lot of people would be scared. They would change it to something else. But to put the word Jesus is a trigger word for a lot of people. It has nothing to do with poor Jesus, but it's a trigger word for a lot of people. And you decided to put it right out there because you know who your audience is. And God bless you for that, brother. I mean, seriously, I was like, wow.
Well, also, what I want to make are movies that I don't care who you are or what you believe. Right. I'm going to try to make a movie that you love. But I've found it's actually better, instead of trying to make 1 million people like you.
Yep.
Just find the 100 people that absolutely love you and build a relationship with them and super serve them, and then let let them be your voice to the masses, and just trust that those people are indicative of some level of the population, and there's more of them. And so with Jesus Revolution, it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because we don't have near as much, advertising money as we did with American Underdog. But we've taken the time to go all over the country and really connect the film to the audience and its leaders. And there's a message behind the movie. And I love the movie. It's a fun movie. It'll make you laugh and cry.
Yeah.
And I think the performances are really good. It's kind of like my Almost Famous, or some ode to a Cameron Crowe film,
Oh, I could tell that. I
But,
could see that, by the way. I could definitely see
right,
that.
right. What did Picasso say? Good artists copy, great artists steal. Cameron Crowe ever listens to this, I'm sorry. But it sort of is in that spirit. And the cool thing I think about it is I didn't name the movie. Time Magazine named the movie. So this is a cover of Time Magazine from 1971 at a very similar time. And there was this psychedelic sort of Jesus on the cover. And with this 10-page spread that was so incredibly optimistic and hopeful. And it just said Jesus Revolution. And it was this sweeping hippie revival that was going on all over America. So the good news is there's a historical context. Time Magazine called it this, and we're just telling the story of that cover.
And what's fascinating is, after I watched the movie, it's not a preachy movie. It's actually, I love the trailer, because it's not if you don't believe in Jesus, or you don't believe in that, you could still enjoy this film, because it's just a great story of transformation, of people searching for themselves and finding, the divine within themselves, and divine within groups of people, opening up doors that are shut, discrimination against people just because of the way they look.
Yeah.
There's so many themes in this film that I absolutely loved and connected with. It's not like a beat you over the head with a Bible conversation. It is not by any stretch of the imagination. It really is a wonderful film that almost anybody can enjoy. I'm
glad you said, that's what we were trying for. And I'm so glad to hear you say that. We basically, that was exactly the intent. I wanted to make a movie. I just think the narrower the focus, the wider the appeal. And that's why I think Jason Blum does that really well. He does something specific really well. But I took my daughter to Megan and really enjoyed it, and so I think that what we're doing is we understand who we are and the audience that we serve, and we're unapologetic and unafraid of telling stories that we love, that we hope other people are going to love too. And with this story, what's been interesting about it is, because it is set in the world of the church in the 70s, but people that don't believe or have any sort of religious affiliation at all love and appreciate the movie, because they see it as sort of a modern day allegory of loving the other. So basically the story is this sort of square pastor, dared by his daughter, opens his church to this group of hippies that at the time weren't allowed to come to church. Like at the time, it was like, for a hippie to go to church, it was like, go home, get a job, take a bath, cut your hair, rejoin society. Now maybe you can come to church. And he just let them in. And there was this hippie street preacher named Lonnie Frisbee, and it was like a nitroglycerin moment, and that sparked this nationwide awakening. So there's a ton of natural humor in it, because these groups of people are so different. But that theme of like opening your heart and your mind and literally your doors to a group of people that society would say you can't hang out with, that society would say is a polar opposite point of view than you, and actually learning to love each other and joining together in something that seems to play really strong and really relevant to today's sort of just this situation that we're in as a country, no matter what people believe. And so it's cool to be able to do something really specific, but that also plays as a broader sort of motivational allegory,
And what's wonderful about what you and Andy, your brother, do with your films is that you have this beautiful balancing act that you do with all of your films, that you put just enough in to serve the core audience, but you put just enough in that someone outside of your core audience could enjoy it. Like I can only imagine it was you nailed it right down the middle for your core audience. But when you're watching it, anyone can enjoy that film. Anyone can enjoy American Underdog. Like you don't have to.
I'm glad to hear you say that's the goal. I mean, a lot of times it's like, it's fun to be able to test contrarian opinions, like opinions that maybe other people don't share. And my opinion about Christianity is it's not divisive. It's not, you know, there's this verse in the Bible that says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. And then it says, against these things, there is no law. And my opinion is when you portray those things correctly, like who's going to say we don't need more love, joy, peace, and patience and kindness with each other and goodness in society?
Mhm.
We need these things today. And I think if you just let the story do the work, trust the audience's, abilities, and you don't have to beat them over the head. And I think that just choose stories that you feel are powerful and life changing and tell them to the best of your ability. I think that that's just a better way to do it. And I think if you do it right, these stories can be inviting and inspiring no matter what belief you have. And I don't think anyone should ever feel alienated or driven away or ostracized by Christianity. I just think that that's unfortunate. And one of the things that I would hope changes, over the next decade is this is good stuff for everybody. And those are the stories that we want to tell. And I think when you just really portray and infuse the virtues of Christianity in ways that are really entertaining and stories, there are things that are universally needed, and things that we who doesn't love a good redemption story,
I mean, absolutely. And I mean, it's very progressive what you're saying, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And in
Yeah,
a wonderful way, because your point of view on your faith is not, and this is a weird thing because I lived in the bubble of Los Angeles for 13 years. And then when I
hmm,
moved to Austin, I just saw things a little bit differently. It's really interesting to see. And by the way,
yeah,
Austin, not the most conservative situation in
yeah,
Texas by any
yeah.
stretch of the imagination.
It
This,
well,
this is what this is all the crazies and all the weirdos, and keep Austin
it's a
weird,
great
and
city though.
and it's a
Yeah,
wonderful city. But I just start seeing things a little bit differently on the way. I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense now. And it's I love this. I love what you guys are trying to do because you are trying to bring the two sides, whatever those
the
sides
two sides
are,
together.
together,
Yeah,
because that's what we should be doing regardless. You and I both grew up at a time when we both could, believe different things and still have a beer or still have a conversation or watch football.
absolutely.
Like I'm
Yeah,
like, are you kidding me? My father and me have completely different points of view on life, and uncles and all that kind of stuff in the family. But we still get together, we still love each other, we still,
that's
we
right.
might,
And
but we
that's
might not
what's
agree.
needed. It sounds like such a cliche, but
Yeah.
love really is the answer.
I
In,
mean,
in
it
the sense of like
is.
when you think of like uh you know there is so much more that unifies us, and things to agree on, and then divides us. And I think there's just this gap of fear in the middle.
Yep.
And I for me, I had the good fortune of being born and raised in like the buckle of the Bible Belt, Birmingham, Alabama, but very quickly at the age of 15, traveling outside of it because I was working for ESPN. And then in marketing the films, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I commute to and work in Los Angeles. Spend about half the week or a week of the month or whatever there. We market these films everywhere. I have traveled the continental United States, man. And you just realize that there's a lot that binds us together, and there's a lot to have a beer over and talk about and celebrate. And when you just boil things down to their themes and their values, there is a lot of values that we agree on. And so I think as a Christian, what I've realized is, man, actually there's a hunger for this stuff beyond belief, in
Oh,
terms of like beyond what people believe. I think if you sit down and watch some things that are really well made, but so sort of we had a decade of the anti-hero and very good versions of that. But if you binge Game of Thrones, House of Cards, Breaking Bad, it's hard to believe in anything, let alone yourself. And I think people are craving a sense of meaning and purpose and values, and so there's sort of a return. So yeah, has Christianity been weaponized and counterfeit? Absolutely. But that's just what we do as people, whether it's politics or religion or whatever.
all,
And I would
all
say,
religions, by the way, almost all
yeah,
religions.
but I would say that it says something about the source, because you only ever really weaponize something that's intrinsically powerful, and you only counterfeit something that's intrinsically valuable. So of course the crazies are going to use this thing to their own, purposes, and there's going to be televangelists, and there's going to be rogue people, but I think the thing at its source is beautiful and meaningful and powerful. And whether you believe it to be absolutely true, like I do, and I find great meaning from that, or whether you're like Thomas Jefferson, who famously cut all of the references to the divinity of Christ out of the Bible. It's called the Thomas Jefferson Bible. The reason he did that is he said he didn't really believe in the divinity or questioned it, but he thought the teachings of Jesus were the greatest moral reset in the history of the world, and I agree with him. And so it's just good stuff. It's, loving your neighbor, going the extra mile, turning the cheek, being known by how you love people. Like, these are things that if we reintroduce to society would be better for it. And I think that the best way to do that is through stories. And so what we want to do is we want to tell stories that certainly resonate with our core audience, with that Heartland audience, and super serve them. But also are just hopefully entertaining and applicable to whoever wanders in the theater. But what we want to do first and foremost is entertain. We're entertainers first, and I hope there is nothing like being in an audience of people and hearing them laugh and cry and cheer at a movie. And I've never seen a movie like Jesus Revolution. We've really screened it far and wide and early. Lionsgate's let us. We've shown it to a lot of people, and I've not ever been a part of a movie where people are cheering during the film at certain points, and that's a wonderful experience. And it's wonderful to connect with the core audience like that.
It's and what you're saying is true, because I've noticed that as well in some of the other work that I do and other shows that I do, that people are starving for this kind of message, these positive messages, these positive stories, these things that fill you up. And look, I love Breaking Bad. I thought Breaking Bad was one of the greatest.
Amazing. It's the most perfect last hours of television ever
made. No question.
Ever.
And other than maybe 2 episodes of the entire series, except that fly episode drove me nuts. Other than that, the whole series was almost perfection. It really was. As an art, as an art piece. It was beautiful. But at the end, you don't feel really uplifted by what Walter White has been doing. It's been entertaining as hell. But then you watch something like Shawshank, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And
that's right. That's exactly the difference. Yeah.
And then you look at Shawshank, and if you look at IMDb, it overtook The Godfather as the best film ever made. How and why? And I've said this, and I've talked to Oscar-winning screenwriters about this. I've talked to every story analyst about this. I've talked to filmmakers about this. I'm like, what is it about that film that has connected with so many people from every walk of life since its release? And it's the worst name in film history. On paper, it is not a particularly great story. It's like, oh, it's a prison movie.
Tough story. It's a tough story too. Yeah.
Right. It's not a particularly like innovative story on the surface. But what Frank Darabont was able to do with that movie has connected so deeply with people who think Steven Seagal's the greatest actor of all time love Shawshank.
Yeah, no, it transcends, man. And I'll tell you what it is at its essence. I love to think about and find the essence of things. There's this great book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This guy was in several, survived the Holocaust. His family didn't, and a psychologist, was in several camps, came out and finished the work that he began before, which led to one of the great psychology books ever written, which is Man's Search for Meaning. And he had this incredible optimism, even though of all he'd been through. And his take was that he came up with this thing, logotherapy, which is the Greek word for meaning, or logotherapy. I don't know how to say it. It's the Greek word for meaning. And his point was that actually pleasure wasn't sort of the end all, like Freud. His point was that actually the quest is to find a sense of meaning and purpose to your life. That is what everyone's looking for. So if you talk about the function of a storyteller, whether that's a movie or a play or sitting around a campfire, the function of a storyteller in society is to try to take all this nonsense and all these things that don't connect and, and fit them together to bring a sense of order and meaning and purpose. So the stories that I think transcend, when Randall Wallace writes that line, every man dies, not every man really lives, in the middle of a brilliant film, Braveheart. But that's meaning and purpose. And I think it's actually the power of that theme that makes that movie transcend, not its genre. I think it's the theme of living from your heart and living from your soul, and living from your passion. And Shawshank's the same way. Hard movie, but brilliant material in terms of meaning and purpose. And so I think when we did I Can Only Imagine, I took Bart aside and just says, what is the essence of how does this, a dude that looks like you, no offense, right, this multi-platinum juggernaut, independent artist, not you, I'm talking about Bart. You look great. Anyway,
I appreciate that.
And so does Bart now. But anyway, but the idea of, how does he's just an everyman. You know what I'm saying? Like there's nothing, and he was an everyman with an everyman band that was, independent from Texas. How do you write this multi-platinum juggernaut? I just said, what do people feel when they hear the song? And because I got to match that with the movie, whether people know it or not, they're going to want to feel the same way. And he said, it's a rush of hope. That's what they feel. And so we sort of engineered the whole movie around that same experience. And I just feel like people need a rush of hope right now. They need a sense of like, my life matters. There's meaning to life. There's some sort of destiny. There's some sort of purpose here. And I need sort of, I need to go out of a theater feeling hopeful and feeling like I matter and life is worth living. And I think that as great as Breaking Bad is, as great as Game of Thrones is, except for the last season, please remake it. You have the opposite after you watch those things. You just sort of feel this sense of it's me versus everyone else, hopelessness, and it's survival at all costs. And I think that's seeped into our society a little bit. And I honestly think that the aggregate entertainment is one of the reasons why we're at each other's throats, because if you watch Game of Thrones and House of Cards, Breaking Bad, and all these other things, it's like, okay, there's one law. I got to live and you got to die, and that's it. It's me versus everybody. And I think that's gotten into society a little bit. And I actually think, what we say is the world needs a little more Capra in it. A sense of Frank Capra. It's a Wonderful Life and things like that. A little optimism, a little hope, and I think that there's room in the market for it.
Do you think that because I think there's going to come I do think there's going to come a point in the next decade that there's going to be a runaway hit, like a juggernaut hit. And it's not going to be one, there's going to be a series of them that are, and you guys are probably going to be behind one or two of them at least.
Who knows?
But that's going to connect with the majority of people looking for that rush of hope. And they're going to go, oh, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't remake another Star Wars or another Marvel show. And maybe we should start putting some money into this. Do you think that will ever happen within the studio? Because they always go where the money goes, even after Passion of the Christ.
Everything is cyclical. I think everything is cyclical and everything is counter programming. And I think one of the reasons I Can Only Imagine worked was there was an article before it came out that Deadline wrote that said like the music biopic is dead. Like these films don't work anymore. The point is, we sort of were at the front end of the reemergence of a dormant genre. Now you think like Elvis and A Star Is Born and, Bohemian Rhapsody and all these music, like one right after the other. This is now a reestablished genre, so it's actually a little more risky. One of the real hard things about filmmaking is, and independent filmmaking especially, is that the way to win with independent film is our minds are differential engines, meaning there's a great marketing book, Seth Godin's book, Purple Cow, where his whole thesis is that if you see a cow, you don't take a photo of a cow. You don't tweet a cow. You've seen a cow. They're all cows. They all look the same. But my gosh, if that cow was purple, oh my gosh, there's a purple cow. So I'm going to tweet that, so my point is that you really have to have the courage and conviction that if something is entertaining and meaningful to you, it'll be entertaining and meaningful to other people. Like there's more of you. And I remember with I Can Only Imagine, we had done all this research and we had seen a gap in the market. And then we had seen the need for a brand. And I knew that I love that song, and everybody I knew loved
Oh,
that song.
yeah.
And so in the core community, but every studio told us no. One executive in the studio said, I think there's 18,000 people that would watch this movie, and that's it. That's the total audience. This will never work. But we just went forward with a conviction. But because we went forward with a conviction, we owned it, because nobody would take a risk on it, and we benefited from that. And so I think you have to be willing to be different, and you have to be willing to take bets on things that you feel deeply. And I think when you listen to the stories of like Star Wars or Jaws, or one of the great bluffs of our industry in that 3-hour Empire of Dreams documentary is that the chairman of 20th Century Fox came to Alan Ladd Jr., who was the chairman of the Motion Picture Group, and said, it was in post-production, said, shut down this Star Wars thing. It's an embarrassment to the studio. And Alan Ladd Jr., not having seen a frame of the film, said, I've seen it. It's the greatest movie ever made. It's one of the greatest bluffs in the history of our industry. But the point is, that's how weird Star Wars was to everyone that was looking at it, and the studio was sending notes like the Wookiee should have pants. Why does the Wookiee not have pants? Like, stupid, like
Really?
The point is that the studio business is a rear view business, and the thing is like, hey, we want something totally original that's just like something else that made $1 billion last year. Like, that's just the way they think. And so it takes a level of conviction, and it takes a level of, as an independent filmmaker, extraordinary belief. And I actually think a lot of independent filmmakers have, like, they want to stay above that. Like, well, yeah, I'm working on this thing, and it's going to be good. You actually have to have an attitude of like, I love this. I know there's people that love this. I'm trying to make it the best I can, but I'm telling you, there's an audience for this. And you have to have a level of conviction in yourself and in the thing that you're creating that is uncommon, to will it through the system and to get money for it, and then to will it into existence. And that's, I think, missing a lot in independent film,
And I think the one thing that we can kind of summarize from this conversation is, as independent filmmakers, you need to not just make a movie that tickles your own fancy. It has to do a little bit of that, but you have to find out if there's an audience for it. And don't say horror movies. A lot of people like horror movies. That's too big, which is, again, going back to my book. It's about niching down to the point where, like, what is an audience that will enjoy this movie and I can talk to, which is what that executive said. Can you reach that audience with the money and the resources and the abilities that you have? And if you can combine those two, then you have a potential, not a guarantee, a potential for success. But the biggest thing is like, I'm going to make an action movie because people like action movies. You're done.
Well, what's interesting about that is, I think one of the real secrets to that, if you want to know like a key that sort of unlocks it, it's summarized in the word disdain. And what I mean by that, that's what I really bonded with Jason Blum over, was any audience that feels disdain, right? He felt like 20 years ago, the horror audience felt disdain. Like, studios were like, they don't care, like, just murder a bunch of people. It doesn't have to be good. And the audience felt that. And, I've learned in therapy, I should do it a little more. The primary needs of people are not to be agreed with. You don't have to agree with them. People just want to feel seen and heard and understood. And identifying, people like horror movies, is like, well, now it's like, well, no, yeah, they like horror movies, and guess who saw that before no one else did? Jason Blum, and now he's dominated and monopolized the market. So you have like a 1 in 1,000th chance of competing with him. What you really have to see and have the courage to embrace is an underserved audience that is being disdained by the industry. And you have to be willing to understand that instead of trying to be cool at cocktail parties in LA, what makes you cool at cocktail parties in LA? Winning. So go win with an audience, and then, and focus on just loving an audience. And so for me, the faith audience is one of those groups that, they're being called things like, again, it's not a political affiliation, but it's seen that way in LA. And so they're being called things like deplorable. And there's also this stigma of poor quality. I remember talking to an investor, his daughter was there, and I said, you want to know the opportunity and the problem in faith? It's the same thing. He said, sure. I turned to his daughter and said, let's play rapid word association game. I'm just going to say something, just respond. She said, okay. And I said, Christian movies. And she goes, ew. And I'm like, in one syllable, she just described the problem and the opportunity. Like, if you fix that, so for a lot of people, they don't want to be associated with it. I would rather go right at it. Like Jason Blum went right at it with horror and say, okay, we hear you. We hear that there's a quality problem, and it's also a lack of authenticity, and you're underserved, and you're disdained by whatever you're getting. We're gonna fix that on your behalf. That's the business opportunity. So you really, whether that's Crunchyroll, think about it. VIX Plus is just having huge growth right now. Or Blum doing something specific
Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast on YouTube.
Mr. Beast. Yeah, it's exactly getting to know, developing a relationship, nurturing a relationship with an audience that's underserved, that no one else sees value in yet, or no one has the courage to really give them what they want, or an audience that you understand and are representing in a unique way, like a movie like Crazy Rich Asians or whatever. Having the courage to do that instead of have the courage to be unique. Conformity is not the way forward in our industry. Everyone in LA looks the same, has the same spec script in their back pocket, wants to talk about themselves, and so it's homogenized. And so to me, the courage to be different is the way forward. And the people like Tyler Perry or Jason or people that I've interacted with, they have way more success by differentiating. And the narrower the focus is, the wider the appeal. And so it's just have the courage and conviction to do something that you really believe in, that you want and need, and that you're connected to an audience that wants and needs, and be willing to be unpopular while you do it, because you'll be popular when it works. And that's just a different way to think and a different way forward. But if you identify, if you're just in the rearview mirror and the audience, action films work. Yeah. And everyone knows that. And that's why it's at saturation. That's impossible. You have to be the one that says, hey, this will work. And everyone says, you're crazy and weird for years. Until all of a sudden you're not.
All of them. Cameron.
That's how right.
That's what you have to do. Titanic, horrible idea. Avatar, horrible idea. Right?
Titanic.
That's what they all said.
If you listen to Peter Cherning, Titanic, most expensive movie
at the time,
on top of the most expensive movie. It was $110 million, most expensive movie at the time, and he went $110 million over budget.
Yeah.
So
for a story that we knew the ending. For a story that we knew the ending of.
So to me, I think, look, if I can leave you with anything, is do things that you really believe in, and just match perseverance with curiosity, and then also a level of courage in your decisions. I would rather fail courageously than fail because I made a safe choice, and do something that you really believe in, and have the courage to be different, and have the courage to put a different voice out there, because I think that that's what people want is unique voices that represent unique audiences. That's one of the joys of the film world, is you get to sort of see things through someone else's eyes. And so that's what I'll leave. Otherwise, the biggest thing is just to keep learning constantly and never, ever, ever quit. Success might be just around the corner. You never know.
So, Jon, I'll ask you a few questions to ask all my guests. What is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Oh my gosh, what a question! I'm horrible at answering questions. I would actually say the value of failure. I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what people don't failure is incredibly valuable, and it's really the only path to success. And I think it's something that we all run from. But if we actually ran towards it and learned to sort of fail small and iterate, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yes, some things do kill you, though. You want to avoid those things. But if you can sort of fail and learn, it's like Thomas Edison said, I've not failed. I've just learned 10,000 ways not to make the light bulb. If you embrace failure as a part of your process, I think that's the way to win. And it took me a long time it's a very vulnerable thing to be willing to fail, so that you can learn how to win. And I think that took me the longest to learn.
And the toughest question of all, 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Three of my favorite films of all time. I have this list of sort of films that I just think no film. First of all, there's no perfect film. I think George Lucas said it best: films are never complete; they're only abandoned. But there are films that I think for the moment in time in which they were created are untouchable. Like, don't change a frame. So I think I'm trying to think of some of those. And then there's also just great films that I've seen, recently. But to me, Braveheart is still just like chicken soup for my soul. I just think that that's such a well-made film that it just gets me, man. It just gets me every time. It's good so filmmaker. Good. I still think Saving Private Ryan is one of those things when he says "earn this" at the end. That's a summary of an entire generation, and just incredible. I think The King's Speech is amazing. I think, I'm beyond three. Slumdog Millionaire. Fellowship of the Ring was just one of the transcendent experiences I had in the theater. Like, oh my gosh. And then I think some of the old ones. I think It's a Wonderful Life and Casablanca. I think is a darn perfect movie. I've exceeded my limitations.
Well, I mean, I'd argue.
What's your answer to that question?
I mean, well, Shawshank is a perfect movie in my opinion. I mean, Shawshank is
perfect.
It's a perfect. Yeah. I think Back to the Future is perfect. It's one of the greatest scripts ever made.
It kind of is, isn't it?
It is. It is as perfect of a screenplay and perfect of an execution.
By the way, produced by Steven Spielberg. And Zemeckis said there's no better producer than a director.
And everyone said they were crazy, and it was only Steven that was able to push it through. And then they stopped 2 weeks after shooting with the wrong guy. Like, yeah, we're gonna redo these last. Can you imagine?
Welcome to the film business.
Jaws is another perfect film. I mean, that movie doesn't. It just is perfect.
Jaws is one of those things where the limitations. The limitations are what made it perfect, for sure. I think, look, I would put Top Gun Maverick up there as one of the best experiences I've had in the theater in a long time.
Man, I can't
really good.
Man, it is such a good movie. And it's, there's nostalgia with that film, without question for guys like you and me, but it is just damn near perfect in what it was it aimed to do. Without question. And I'd also put up The Matrix as almost as a perfect movie as well.
The Matrix is one of the, again, it's as perfect as a movie gets by far. I think probably the filmmaker that I most trust now, and I can't wait for Indiana Jones, is James Mangold. I think that dude just fires.
He nails it
every time. Like, I thought Ford versus Ferrari, unbelievable.
Amazing. Logan. He transcended the genre.
And that, again, Logan's one of those where it transcends. It's hyper violent, it's gritty, but that quest for meaning and purpose and transcendence is all right there. And then television, I just think I'm one of those. I know everyone's on it, but I think The Last of Us is great. I just think it's really.
I hear that's good, but for me, Yellowstone right now is anything that Taylor does.
See, I haven't taken the Yellowstone trip. Like, I haven't.
Dude, you gotta take the Yellowstone.
It's on my list.
Best writing I've ever seen on television. It's so good.
I think anything Vince Gilligan does is just like he's such a student of our industry and our craft.
He's so good.
That just comes. He's like Tarantino in that way. It comes out. His love and obsession of the craft comes out. So
John,
lots of good movies, man.
When and where can we see Jesus Revolution?
Jesus Revolution comes out nationwide February 24th. It's in theaters everywhere. And thank you, Cameron Crowe, for all the things that I stole. And I hope you enjoy it the very same way. And I think no matter what you believe, you'll really enjoy it. It's an enjoyable film. And go check it out in theaters.
John, I could talk to you for hours, brother. I appreciate you coming on, man.
This was fun, man. Likewise.
You and your brother have to, when you come down to Austin, we got to go grab a beer, man. Without question.
I love it. I'm there pretty frequently. So let's do it.
I appreciate you.
I love it.